So this next episode focuses on the topic of causality. Now, first of all, the main question is, why is this an important topic when it comes to the issue of enlightenment and spiritual development? So, awakening can be described as a state of complete clarity, also as to the nature of consciousness and reality. It is maintained or generally thought that all suffering fades away when such clarity and such realization is achieved. Now, glimpses of such clarity can cause temporary states of release, of calm, of peace, as well as permanent, even though partial, reductions of suffering. So essentially, the more you grasp the nature of reality, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to escape some suffering. Now, this presupposes that suffering itself may be caused by an erroneous perception of reality. This is something very typical of Buddhism, for example, and many other Eastern philosophies. It's therefore the purpose of any spiritual practice to correct such erroneous perceptions, whether directly or indirectly. So, what are some key misunderstandings on the nature of reality? Well, one of them is the nature of existence, in particular, the nature of the existence of one's own self and of others. The idea that we buy into this idea that objects exist as separate individual entities, but understanding how that is more of a construct is an essential part of spiritual awakening. And the other key misunderstanding is the nature of causality, cause and effect, and its relation to guilt, good and evil, and a lot of the suffering that we experience. So while many practices do not directly address these two items, it's important to note that actually most do so sort of indirectly. So most practices, even if you're working on trauma, for example, are somewhat helping us realize one of these two truths, if not both. Now, what do we mean by causality? Well, the very simple notion that everything has a cause. You can have objects where one cause has one effect that causes another effect that causes another effect, and so on and so forth. You can have multiple causes producing one effect, or one cause producing multiple effects. Or you can even have multiple causes that produce multiple effects that condition each other and cause multiple effects. So you have webs of causality. And the basic point is that everything is correlated. There is really no process, whether it is a physical process or a mental process, that escapes this web of causality. Now, why is this relevant? Have you ever experienced this notion of, I just want to know why. I just want to know why this person did this thing or why this thing happened. So have you noticed how often we seek to understand the cause of an event to come to terms with it? It's almost as if the idea that an event may not have a clear cause is what's causing us pain. It's often when we understand that there was a cause behind a person's action that we are able to have, for example, compassion for it. Now, it is important to note, though, that it is not necessary to reconstruct the precise cause of something to be at peace with it. Sometimes, even just reminding ourselves that an event has one or many causes may be actually enough. Understanding that causality is behind all event helps our mind to surrender. Now, what are the advantages of surrendering to events based on our understanding of causality? Well, I'll read this. While reflecting on causality and its relation to events can help surrender to them, it is also worth noting that a mind that is open to understanding all causes of an event, is also much more likely to be able to intelligently and skillfully act on those causes to handle future instances of that situation. So that means that an understanding of causality, on one hand, allows you to surrender to an event, but on the other hand, it also gives you more agency to handle that event, to prevent that event moving forward. So it's sort of a win-win on a spiritual level, where you have surrender, and on a practical level, where you actually deal with things. Accepting the inevitability of something allows you to better see its causes, thus giving you more tool to handle it in the future. So things are inevitable up till the present moment. From an absolute point of view, they're also inevitable in the future. But from your own point of view, the more you understand about the causes of an event, the more you're able to act upon it. So the following is what we can call a map of causality. This is a broad map of consciousness. It's based on integral theory, created by the form of integral theory created by Ken Wilber. And this map is something that can help you reflect and further root your sense that everything has a cause. So the way we go about this is that we divide essentially consciousness and the world in different areas. We have the area of psychology and personal experience in the top left corner, the area of neurobiology in the top right corner, the area of natural and socioeconomic systems, and the area of culture and collective consciousness. So I'm going to try and make this a little bit less theoretical, a little bit more practical, in a way that you can actually use it. So let's start to divide this map in two sides. So you have on the upper side, basically, all on here, anything that is individual. So causes that are related to things that are happening inside people. So an individual person, in the way they act, can be affected by their psychology and personal life experiences, their traumas, how cognitively developed they are, what models they have had in their life. But this is all things that are related to how this individual has built psychologically over time. Within this individual, you can also find physiological causes. So this is their hormones, how their brain has developed, their genetics. So any physiological thing that is inside of them. So you need to think that when a person is acting, they're simultaneously being influenced by their psychology as well as by their neurobiology in a myriad of sub-aspects within each. So you're talking to a person, they could be angry because they had a trauma related to what just happened, or because they're just low on sugar, or both. On the other side of the spectrum, so on the bottom, we have collective causes. So collective causes can be something like culture. Culture is collective, is I may behave or have certain attitudes because within my culture, say people tend to discriminate LGBT people, or tend to be racist, or tend to hold general views. But I can also be influenced by external aspects that are more objective, like, am I concerned about money? How is the resources in my context? Like, how is the general system of society could be affecting me? So someone could get angry at you because you offended something that is related to their culture, or because you're threatening their livelihood, or even both. So these, you have an individual component that lies inside the person that you're relating to. But then you can have causes that are collective, that lie sort of outside of that person's individual being. Now, another way you can sort of divide this map is between subjective and objective. So people are influenced by subjective aspects. So psychology and culture are subjective things. They're rooted in the realm of ideas. But even though they're rooted in the realm of ideas, they have massive implications on our society. Think about the impact of ideologies. An idea like communism or capitalism, it's an idea, but it's an idea that spreads and has wide impacts even into the world of objective reality. And here we go into the objective reality in the bottom, where you have, on one hand, as we mentioned before, the neurobiology of individual. It's something tangible. You can actually look at the brain scan of a sociopath or a psychopath and see how their brain is wired differently from those of others. As well as external circumstances. A person that is born in a third world country will have different causal constraints than a person born in a capitalist society. A person that lives in a society full of resources is going to have different freedom than someone that doesn't. So this is just to say that people are continually influenced simultaneously by a combination of subjective and objective causes that are both individual, that lie within the individual, or collective. So this is just something that you can sort of use as a map when you're trying to reconstruct an event. And you can see, well, what has caused this event? The physiology of the person, the psychology of the person, the culture, the system and society around this person, or all of the above together. This just gives you a sense of how many things are simultaneously acting upon people in their decision making. So you can sort of imagine it like this. You have this big map with a large map of causal structures, of causes that are affecting each other, a complex web of causality that spans through personal psychology, neurobiology, culture, nature, and human ecological, social, economical, and technological systems. Every single moment, everything that is happening is influenced by all of these aspects. So how is that any helpful? How do you practice causality? How do you make that part of your meditative and spiritual practice? It's very simple. Look at different things, especially things that bother you, with which you need to come to terms with. From people to yourself, from your environment to imminent dangers, all the way to even past events. And sit for a moment with that event and allow this insight to come to your mind. This thing had causes. All sorts of causes. You can try for a moment to sort of let your mind wonder what those causes could be in these different realms of being that we mentioned. And you may notice a small sense of relief upon grasping the sheer inevitability of what had happened until now. We place a lot of emphasis, a lot of moral emphasis on choices. But this person chose to do that. Yes, but everything has a cause. Even that choice was influenced by culture, by neurobiology, by cultural constraints, as well as psychological ones, by a myriad of things. So, really understanding that, unfortunately, even horrible things could not have been otherwise, at least in the past, is something that can allow us to better surrender and understand them. You can even notice within yourself, and this is a different way you can practice causality, is notice how all thoughts, all the experiences that you have in your mind are also part of an inextricable chain of cause and effect. Really observe for a moment your thoughts, here and now, and realize that thought had a cause. That idea, if you're thinking about something, the mere concepts by which you describe that thing are inherited from your culture. If you were hit by a car, that event was caused by the fact that cars exist. by the fact that something happened to produce, for example, an accident, by your emotional understanding of it, which is mediated by how people around you taught you to relate to these events. There is an infinite chain of causality. So again, observe yourself, observe your thoughts, recognize how each of those ultimately had many, many, many causes. And then you can ask yourself this: what is left of the self when you realize the fact that when you realize its inextricable nature from all other events? The idea that you cannot separate anything that you are from something that is related to something else, from something that has been caused by other things. And this is something that tends to freak people out, because you feel like, oh my God, nothing is left. I'm gonna die. I'm gonna just be evaporated from reality. This question of what is left of what we call the self, if all of its parts are part of an endless chain of cause and effect, has a very simple answer. And it's an answer that can help you come to terms with this realization of the empty nature of self. And that is I amness. I amness is what is left. I amness, and you can watch the chapter that is specifically dedicated to it. I amness is the observer, is the subjective, the ground that is observing every single experience, the single I am that will survive whatever changes within your present awareness. So even when you realize that whatever until a moment ago you called me is actually just part of a chain of cause and effect, therefore you can't quite identify with it, that self that is observing it still remains. Nothing can eliminate that. So I amness is your anchor to work with causality without getting too freaked out, without feeling that you're going to be destroyed, that you're going to die, you're going to be dissipated. Because while that will happen on a relative level, on the level of your sense of identity, on a fundamental level of who you are, that will not happen. And actually you may gain even more and more clarity as to your essential self. And if you want to better understand it, watch the video on I amness. Thank you.